There are many ways to save costs when you are buying parts for your Miata. In this video I will be sharing my best practices, and that might be 10 in total, but I will start with 5 of them that are related to import. So import is an important topic because depending on where you live, what region that you live in, parts availability is good or bad, or the parts are expensive or less expensive. But living in the Netherlands, I often look at Northern America or Eastern Europe, for example, to get my parts. First scenario regarding import is to buy more than what you need. And this may sound strange, but actually it makes sense. The first time I experienced this was when I was retrofitting cruise control on my MB2. Somebody near me wanted to join the project and suggested we could buy the parts together and that way save on shipping costs and customs fees. And so we did. Later we became friends and did another project, and that is when we wanted to install LED rings in the taillights of the MB2. And this is where Max, the friend, maybe ordered 4 or 5 sets of those LED rings from the US. And in that way we could drive down the average costs per set. We then installed them on 3 cars, and I guess Max sold the other 2 sets or installed them in taillights for other people. The second scenario regarding import is when you also buy more, but you do it on your own. So instead of a group buy, you could say, well, does this supplier, this seller, have anything else I could use and that I could then resell, for example? And that's what I did when I was looking for this rare parchment colored wind blocker with speakers. I found it in the US, and that seller also had 5 sets of the cruise control switches for the NC steering wheel. So I bought everything and had it shipped to the Netherlands. Shipping costs were high, but since I could then use these cruise control switches to install cruise control on the cars of NC1 owners, I could recover the high shipping costs. So that was number 2. Moving on to number 3. This is also a scenario where you would buy more, but more from different sellers in the same country. And how does that help? Well, if you have an address where you can have those shipments delivered. I used a company based in Texas and had the goods shipped to them. They will charge a fee per incoming shipment. They will unpack it for you. They can even inspect it and send you pictures, and then repackage everything into a single shipment that is then sent to your country. And that saves you on shipping costs and customs fees when compared to shipping everything separately. Scenario number 4 is basically the ideal scenario, I think, because this involves the help of a friend. In this case, I mentioned Max earlier. He is regularly working in the US at the moment, and if I can find products in the US, I might be able to have them shipped to his hotel. And here's a funny story. I found in my quest to find the cruise control switches for the Mazda Protégé steering wheels, I found 6 steering wheels in Canada. And Max was working somewhere in the lake area, Big Lakes area, I think Minneapolis, if I recall correctly. And I had 6 steering wheels shipped to his hotel. And then he would remove the switches from the steering wheel and also the cover from the back of the steering wheel. And he could then pack that into his luggage when he was flying home. And in that scenario, you save on the shipping costs. You don't have shipping costs and you don't have customs fees either. So, of course, there are limitations to what is feasible from a weight perspective or allowed even. But you can imagine that when he left those 6 steering wheels in his hotel room for the cleaning ladies to remove them. That must have been a pretty sight. So moving on to number 5 in the import category is when you have a friend in that country where you would like to buy parts. And I've used this scenario before when buying parts from the UK, for example, but also when buying parts from the Czech Republic, where an old colleague of mine was willing to buy the part locally and then ship it to my home. That also is now working in the other direction, because some viewers have asked me if I can get the parts locally and then ship them over. So I have a few examples. For example, Torben, one of the channel members, he lives in Norway, and in that region parts can be expensive as well. So I can then source them locally and ship them to Norway. And in fact, I did the same for Kevin, another channel member who was looking for the audio switches on the NB steering wheel. Those come from a Mazda 323F. I bought the steering wheel in Spain, had it shipped to the Netherlands, and from here I could add some wiring and then shipped it to Australia. This is also a scenario that I keep in mind when I shop for parts locally. Last week I went to a junkyard that is about a 1 hour's drive from my home. And when I get there, I try to get as much as possible. So in this case, I was looking for some brake switches and some other switches, and also the Mazda 6 cruise control system, because that Mazda 6 cruise control system can be used on the NA and NB Miatas from all regions. It doesn't matter if it's left-hand drive or right-hand drive, it all works. So in this case, I found 4 sets of that system, which allows me to get some parts in stock. And in fact, I also had a request from the US, somebody that asked me if I could buy the parts locally and then build a wiring harness for him, add the brackets for the assembly, and then that would mean that I could provide a complete package, something you need for the complete install. In this case, when driving to the junkyard, that takes time. It also burns fuel. So when I can recover the costs for the parts that I need myself by buying extra, again, similar to when you buy more parts when you are importing them from a different country. Okay. Then that also brings us to the topic of compatibility. Many Mazda parts have been used on various models. And yeah, in order for that to work, you need to do a bit of homework. And I will explain later on in the video what exactly it is that I do to find out what parts I can get from other cars. I will first give you a few examples. So a well-known upgrade is when you use the RX-8 wiper stalk with the variable interval timing for the NC Miata. That is a small upgrade you can do. It's fairly simple. Just remove a few screws and the connector and you plug it in and that's it. But the RX-8 is fairly rare and the prices for parts are fairly high. But if you realize that that same part was also used on the first generation of the Mazda 6, on models that didn't come with a wiper on the rear window, then the parts availability is a lot different, and also the prices for those parts are lower. So again, an opportunity to save costs if you are aware of the fact that the part was not only used on the RX-8 but also on the Mazda 6. And a similar benefit you can have when you use the light switch from that same Mazda 6 in your NC, and you need that, for example, when you want to add fog lights to the front bumper if you have an NC1 that didn't come with fog lights from the factory. Other examples that I benefit from are the CX-7 steering wheels. The version before the facelift has cruise control switches that can be used on the NC Miata as well. Then also from the collaboration between Ford and Mazda, there are some benefits to be had. You can save some costs there as well. An example in this area is when you have the wiper fluid nozzles from the Mazda Tribute. Those have a much better spray pattern than the ones on the NB Miata. And you could buy them from Mazda. But you could also buy them from Ford, because they were also used on the Ford Maverick and Ford Explorer. And when you buy them at the Ford dealership, you probably pay half of what you pay at the Mazda dealer. So we often forget that the dealership is a source. We tend to think that they're always expensive, but it's not always the case. Sometimes they can provide the parts faster and cheaper than an aftermarket parts supplier. So it's something to bear in mind. So you need to be smart about it. Another scenario where you need to be smart is that you don't fall into the trap that scammers set up for you. I regularly see ads that I can immediately identify as one from a scammer. So what am I looking for in that case? Well, you would see that the profile is fairly new, and there are many parts on offer, often from various generations of the Mazda. So it's not simply a garage sale in that case, because it's unlikely, and the pictures show many different backgrounds, as if they're not shot in the same location. Prices are fairly low, and the comment section is closed, so you cannot make any remark or raise a question. And I've had a similar experience a while ago when I was helping someone to get cruise control back up and running on an NA Miata. This was an American imported version, and cruise control stopped working because the cruise control module had broken. And eventually we placed an ad, and a seller that got in contact with us said he had that part. Then we asked for a picture, and we received the picture, and my standard procedure now is to look up that picture using Google Lens. And in this case it turned out that he, of course, had found a picture on eBay in the US and sent us that picture. So it was clear that he was trying to scam us. Later, fortunately, we found a working module at a reliable source, so that car is running with cruise control again. But again, you need to be smart about it. Coming back to that point where I said, well, you need to figure out which parts are used on which Mazda models. And there are various ways to do it. You could find that information on Mazda dealership sites, on some of them, on eBay. With some sellers, they list the compatible cars, and also some aftermarket parts suppliers will do that. So my favorite website for this is gemellismazdaparts.com, because when you go to that website, you can choose the model that you're looking for, and then the model year. And as a next step, you can browse through different categories of parts, or you could use the search function. And once you've found the part, there is additional information, and one of the tabs is called What This Fits. If you click on that tab, you can see in what model years the part was used on the model that you were looking for, but you can also see on what other models and in what other model years that same part was used. And this is typically the information that you are looking for. And then you would see, for example, that the NB2 front fog lights were not only used on the Miata, but also on the MPV. And there are two different versions of this, from 2001 to 2003, but also from 2004 to 2005. And in both cases, the same fog lights were used on the Mazda MPV. So I suggest you give that a try, but before you do, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not done that already. Please leave your questions and remarks in the comment section below, and I will respond to each and every one of them. Thanks for watching MX5 Info, and until next time.